Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I got him
And Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
Woo. All right. Welcome into Operation Domination. Don't hope to win, be great and dominate. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with the full crew, Adam LaRue and Chase Thornton. Be sure to download and subscribe to Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app, or check out our video content when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. All right, gentlemen. It's week 11. We are 4 games away from the playoffs. Just 4. So for a lot of people, the playoffs may have already started. Because if you're sitting at 4-6, 5-5, you basically have to go on a run to secure your playoff spot. Now, here's what I will say. And you guys can, correct me if I'm wrong on this or not, or what your thoughts are. But this is kind of how I look at it. You're 8-2, 7-3, 6-4. You're kind of still playing a long-term game. You're okay. You're fine. You're 5-5. You're 4-4. You're in that territory. You do need to start playing more week to week. But I'm not totally giving up on long-term ticket shots. Those handcuff running backs, maybe players, the wide receiver position that look like they're starting to play a little bit more over the past few weeks and could maybe find themselves into a role like an a la Troy Franklin. And then if you're 3-7, which I think is the lowest record you can be and still maybe have a chance, you're in full week-to-week mode. I'm not holding on the handcuffs. I'm not holding on the guy. I'm only picking up players that literally give me the best chance to win this week. I don't know. You guys see that the same way, or are you still feeling like more of the fire at like the 4-6, 5-5 mark?
No, if you're at 3-7, 4-6, 5-5, yeah, it's live and let die mode, man. You got to do what you can do. You have to survive in advance, because at this point, yeah, if you lose, someone else is not losing in your league. Obviously, you're done. So I agree with that to some extent. Even if I'm pretty well assured of my spot, though, it's time to start setting rosters, looking ahead and making sure that you are good to go for playoffs. So I'm not going to be hanging on to anybody that's like a long shot hope. What I want to do is I want to set myself up with guys who have that pop ability in the playoffs. If the starter goes down, I want to set myself up with a Blake Corum in case Kyron Williams goes down. I want to set myself up with a Brian Robinson in case CMC goes down. What I'm not doing is hanging on to the long shot hope that maybe Chris Rodriguez will become the number one.
Yeah, that's a good example. That's a good example. What about you, Adam? You see it any differently?
No, I think that's a good way of framing it. I think definitely if you're in the top of the league, then it's about looking at playoff matchups. What can you figure out to give yourself an advantage then? And then if you're in the 5-5, 4-5, 3-7, and that probably below that, you're more or less dead. But 3-7 to 5-5, you're in that spot of, I need the best lineup this week, and I will do anything I can to get that.
If you're at the top of the league, it's real close to end game time, where you can start looking at, okay, what does the schedule look like for weeks 13, 14, whatever your playoffs are, through 17, and maybe starting to make sure that, okay, if you have key players on week 14 buys, do you have that covered? Do you have the room on your bench to carry the defense that has the sweet matchups during the playoffs kind of thing? And can you stash that thing away now while everyone else is not thinking about it? So if you're at the top of the league, it's time to start approaching it that way. But if you're fighting for your playoff life, man, all bets are off and there's no room for sentimentality. It is time to turn and burn. You have to let go of guys that have not performed for you. If you've got AJ Brown and he's not doing it for you, and you got other dudes who can, sorry, I love AJ Brown, but those kinds of decisions, if you're fighting to get in the playoffs, you can't be indecisive. You have to make moves and go.
And you can't be risk averse either. I think that's the big one. Like,
have to be.
Well, ultimately, if you play the way you've been playing, it's probably going to keep happening. Right. Unless it's something weird. Like, an injury or something, like, hey, you just got someone back, maybe that's just all you need. But
Right.
in a lot of those situations,
Otherwise, take the big shots, man. Yeah, go for upside over safe floor at this point. If you're 4-6, go for the big shots. Take swings.
It's a mixture of that. I think you need to take big swings, but also there is a point where you do have to be a little risk averse in the sense that you need to cut down the variance of your team. If you, like, say, if you're 3-7, 4-6, the reason you probably have gotten there is you've had no consistency week to week. So if you've had players and you can find players that now are starting to establish themselves at least as a floor base usage role, that might be the way to go and kind of nail down exactly what you're getting, measure up with your opponent, and figure out where you need to plug a spot. Maybe there's a spot where you need to take a swing at, but start plugging it up with those players, get more of a concrete idea of at least what you can expect week to week, because you should be at the point in your season where you can do that. And the reason I brought this whole conversation up to kick off the show is because we're at that pivotal moment of the season where most leagues, their trade deadlines are week 12 or week 13. Yep. Yeah, week 12 or week 13 for most leagues out there. So this is your last chance, really, that we're coming into to make trades. And depending on where you are in the pendulum, it may decide on what kind of trades you're looking to make for this season. So kind of take a look at that. Again, you might have 2 weeks, you might have 3, find out what it is in your league, but this is the time to really start thinking, no matter what your record is, start thinking about those things. That's why I bring it up. All right, so let's dive into our start sit questions heading into week 11 to help you out in the meantime. Kicking this thing off, I understand it. It's frustrating to own either one of these players. DK Metcalf, who of course is playing Cincinnati this week, and Tetairoa McMillan, who I feel like we somehow get snuck into our questions almost every single week because people just don't know what to do with them, playing against Atlanta. And it's a full point PPR league. So Adam, who would you start between these two for this week?
This one I actually do in PPR, slightly lean towards Tet. I have them in the same tier. They're a couple spots apart. I actually, in full point PPR, if I'm not mistaken, on the season in points per game, it is DK slightly. But for me, it is Tet here. The targets are awesome. Yeah, matchup's a good spot. So I think the game against Atlanta is going to be fairly balanced. And I don't know what to make over Pittsburgh the last 3 weeks. I know they beat Indianapolis, but DK and that passing offense wasn't necessarily good. That was kind of a defensive and the Colts shooting themselves in the foot type of situation. I think DK has, even in full point PPR, like 10 points over the last 2 weeks. The last month has not been kind to him. He had a lot of touchdowns early on. Whereas Tet, my complaint last week stands true. Still middling in the tens and low teens, but that's been better than DK over the last month. We'll put it that way.
Yep.
You depend on touchdowns a lot for DK. And for half point PPR and standard, that makes a ton of sense to go that route. But for otherwise PPR, I'll take my 8 targets, please.
So Chase, you see it the same way?
Yeah, no, I'm going with Tetairoa McMillan over DK Metcalf. And honestly, I don't have it quite as close, I don't think, as Adam does. I mean, Atlanta has been tougher against fantasy wide receivers, but lately they've been giving up big games to wide receivers. The last 3 weeks or so, I mean, they've lost 4 straight games, but in the last 3 weeks, I mean, Alec Pierce went 4 of 7 for 84 yards and a touchdown against them. Pop Douglas against the New England Patriots. Pop Douglas went 4 of 6 for 100 and a score. Diggs went 3 of 4 for 38 and a touchdown, which isn't a ton of yardage, but that's a decent point total for you there. And that's the kind of game that I think Tetairoa McMillan can have, especially when you start comparing it to Pierce and Diggs there. DK Metcalf, listen, he hasn't been great over the last month or so. It's been a weird month of games for the Steelers, just the way that their offense has performed. But not too long ago in week 7, he was pretty weak in week 7 against Cincinnati there. He had a decent game against Green Bay, but he hasn't really done anything since there for DK Metcalf. We know that Pittsburgh is tight end city with our boy F. Arthur Smith. And you know that they're going to want to throw it to them. I see this game, and we'll talk about this. I will talk about this a little bit later. I see this as another running back / tight end game for Pittsburgh there. So I'm leaning Tetairoa McMillan all day long in this kind of a matchup there.
Okay, well.
Dan disagrees.
Completely and utterly. Okay, look, first of all, nothing you guys said during your argument was wrong. Over the last 4 weeks, DK Metcalf has been the wide receiver 55.
Yeah,
And McMillan himself has been the wide receiver 44. Neither have been very good, but Metcalf, yes, has been worse over those past 4 weeks. It's not due to the playing time. It's just due to the inconsistent target share. It's due to the fact that, yes, the play calling is atrocious. It's DK Metcalf. You're allowed to run a slant and a 5-yard crosser and one fly route per game, and then that's the whole offense, and that's its whole route tree. That's enough against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are such a bad defense in every facet: wide receivers, tight ends, and running game. And no matter who they play, they turn them into an offensive juggernaut. Think about the Jets before the bye week. The Jets, Justin Fields, who just had 11 yards passing this past week, as a whole, put up 39 points on the Cincinnati Bengals before the bye, before previous last, so week 9. Like, that's how bad the Bengals are. And because they can put up the points, we get shootouts. The Bengals, believe this or not, have given up more big play receptions than the Dallas Cowboys this season.
Yeah.
DK Metcalf City. In fact, to illustrate how far apart I am right now, DK Metcalf is my wide receiver 19. Tetairoa McMillan is my wide receiver 36. I'm taking a big statement on DK Metcalf gets his big play in this game in which the Bengals cannot pressure Aaron Rodgers. And in games in which Aaron Rodgers has not been pressured at the average rate, DK Metcalf has had good weeks. Those are the only good weeks, but those have been the good weeks. I'm going with the trend here. I'm going with a bad defense. I'm going with a game that I think is going to be higher than everyone expects. Bet the over. And I'm saying DK Metcalf is a better.
Woo.
I would want to agree. I looked at the question at first and I was like, yep, DK for sure.
Nope.
It didn't happen when they played the first time, and that was with Joe Flacco, with the offense driving up the score. They had 64 total points, and he got 3 receptions for 50 yards.
To be fair here, it was a Thursday night game. Thursday night games get weird.
True.
They did. They scored.
And then it was screwed up.
They scored, and it was Pat Freiermuth who doing things that we've never seen Pat Freiermuth do. And I get it, Cincinnati, and tight ends do whatever they want. But Pat Freiermuth, I'm willing to bet, even against Cincinnati, he's not going to get 2 50-yarders against them. I'm willing to bet that this week that does not happen, and one of those instead goes to DK Metcalf.
They have like 16 other tight ends on that roster that they will and do and have thrown to, though. Like that, my thing is, like, I just if they liked DK. If the chemistry was there, I know, because it's not that he's not getting targeted, but it's an Arthur Smith offense. And
the targets have been inconsistent. The playing time is what's consistent. He's on the field constantly. That's what I'm betting, that the usage, the playing time, that comes to fruition for this week. The other thing I would add here on the Tetairoa side with the Atlanta matchup, you have to throw out what Atlanta did more. You've seen that the last 2 weeks when they have their pass rushers finally back in place, their safeties finally back in place, which is helping out their cornerbacks a little bit. They've been pretty good the last couple of weeks. I know Alec Pierce had a decent game, but Michael Pittman was nowhere to be found.
No,
Michael Pittman strikes me more as a Tetairoa McMillan type with the route that he's run and the way that he's utilized than an Alec Pierce. He's not utilized like Alec Pierce is. He's utilized more like Michael Pittman, and he was nowhere to be found.
They need to utilize him because he's the only guy that's worth it on the team. But
that's
no,
also
all good. No, it's all good. Take us both on. Adam.
Yeah. And let me add one more thing. Bryce Young is unable to throw more than 125 yards right now.
But if they all go to Tet, who cares?
Yeah, they haven't been. But anyway, so let's figure this out, fellas. We got a showdown. We got to figure it out. I have the separation between 19 and 36. I don't know where you guys exactly ranked them at, other than you had Tetairoa McMillan ahead.
Who's better?
Of DK Metcalf.
Who finishes higher?
We can just do it that simply if you want to. I don't know if you want to cut the middle. I wasn't sure how far your gaps were. All right, fine. Who's better? DK Metcalf, Tetairoa McMillan.
In full point PPR, I have them in the same tier. So to me, it's
who's ever better.
Yeah.
All right.
Walking.
Yeah. Game on. Yeah, I think I remember the last time you two took me on. That didn't go so well for you guys. I'm just saying. But we'll find out again.
What?
Chase, you can't remember last week.
No, but don't pick on the old man.
It is Chase's birthday, everybody. Wish him a happy birthday on social media at STT Chase FFB. Okay, so let's move on to our next start sit question. We got Zay Flowers playing Cleveland versus Woody Marks. Again, full point PPR and a flex spot. So where do you lean here, Chase?
I'm going Woody. I'm going Woody over Flowers. Look, Zay Flowers, I think people discount how good Zay Flowers actually can be and what an asset he can be on your fantasy roster just because he's not exciting and we don't think of the Ravens as being a passing team. That said, Zay Flowers hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1. And he's had 100-yard game all season, and that was also in week 1. And so, like, for the season, he's averaging 13.2 points per game, but it's really more like 11.3-ish if you throw out that first week blow up that he had there. Whereas Woody Marks looks to me to be an ascendant player. He's coming on. Okay. He had a tough game against Denver a week or two ago, but he's ascending. Okay. Versus Tennessee, the last time he played them too, by the way. Oh, he had 17 rushes, 69 yards, and a score. He also caught 4 or 5 targets for 50 yards and another score. Had like his game of games in terms of his short little career here.
He's going to take over the backfield after that game. And
he's kind of been inching toward it. It didn't happen immediately like we kind of thought it would after that game, but he's been inching toward it here. I like him better than Zay Flowers in this game. So I'm going to roll with Woody Marks here.
Adam, are you in agreement?
On the ranking, yes. I hate it. It makes me feel sick to my stomach. So to be clear, I just want to throw this asterisk out here. I don't necessarily think that Woody Marks is ascendant, and I don't know that I trust that snap share to continue in that way. I think that the game script had a lot to do with it, that passing comeback. I think he probably does eventually, if not already have the lead over Chubb, to be clear. I'm not that insane, but I think 80% is probably game script dependent. Having said that, I think that we could go find Trent Richardson now, and he might get 4 yards per carry against the Titans. So I do think that we probably just go with Woody Marks here, as much as it really pains me to say it.
Listen, ascendant is relative too, by the way. I'm not saying.
Oh yeah, I am not implying that you think he's a star.
Joe Mixon or anything.
What I'm saying is I don't even necessarily know that he is a week-to-week starter. I haven't reached that point myself, but he is a starter this week.
With Chase, we have to take some things literally. So was generational talent for Jerry Michael relative? I'm just saying.
We'll never know because he got hurt, dude.
We'll never know. We'll
never know. But Woody Marks, we know. I mean,
do we know
trends? We see the way the wind's blowing down in Houston.
So I do want to point that out. So this is where I want to piggyback. And I'm in agreement with you guys. I have Woody Marks slightly ahead of Zay Flowers when it comes to the overall flex rankings this week. Zay Flowers still has a great floor, but the problem is that he only has a floor. To your guys' point, 1 touchdown this year. He doesn't go over 100 yards hardly ever. He's the number 1 target of a team that doesn't throw the ball all that much ultimately. And that's what holds him back, even though he's a fantastic route runner. If he were to go anywhere else, he would be pretty much unstoppable if he ever winds up on a pass first type offense. I do want to point that out there. I agree.
Also, the Browns don't help the situation at all.
No, yeah, it's a tough matchup. This is a tough matchup compared to the matchup.
Compared to the Titans, it's a tough matchup.
It's the best matchup you can go against. Yeah.
Compared to the Titans, it's one hell of a matchup. I do want to kind of point out, though, that when it comes to wide receivers, the Browns are not really that scary of a matchup. They're more in the middle of the pack here in fantasy points per game given up to wide receivers. It's the running game, it's the deep balls, and it's the tight ends that seem to disappear when you're playing against Cleveland. But the wide receivers have actually been kind of okay, but Zay Flowers not in a position to take advantage of what they lack most in that situation.
It's a tough matchup for Zay Flowers. Not all receivers. I agree. Zay Flowers, who to get his ceiling, you need a deep ball. It's a tough matchup.
It's the least like surprising thing ever to see Zay Flowers week in, week out lead that team in receiving, in targets, and in wide receiver yardage and everything else. But then see a dude like, Rashad Bateman fell into a touchdown. He's the one that scored for them. Oh, DeAndre Hopkins fell into a
Mark Andrews fell into a touchdown.
Mark Andrews fell into 3 touchdowns.
He doesn't do anything besides fall into touchdowns at this point in his career. He doesn't do anything else. Anyway, I want to get back to my point here. So it's Woody Marks, but I do want to point this out. So Adam, you talked about game script being the lead for the volume split that we saw, especially last week, because some people were going off the last week between Woody Marks and Nick Chubb. The box score overall volume of usage, 100% agree. The fact that it was a 60-10 split, I believe, or a 60-5 split was the snap counts. That was game script. Not all of it, though, was.
Oh, yeah.
So early in the game, like what we've been seeing since that first Tennessee game is mostly Marks, Chubb, series by series. That's mostly what we've been seeing. There was a clear shift this past week when the game was still in hand. It was Woody Marks it was Woody Marks 2 series to Chubb's 1. And then those drives last a little bit longer. Then game script become a factor. Whenever they're down, Woody Marks starts to play more at that point too. We also saw a shift in Houston when it came to the rookie wide receivers. The rookie wide receivers finally started to play more. Christian Kirk got moved off to the side. And while that in itself may not directly affect your Woody Marks usage or fantasy value for this week, what it does show me is that Houston may finally be ready to just shift to their younger guys for the rest of the season. Yep. I think that's a trend that we're starting to see. If that is the case, Woody Marks has been a high-end RB3 for the most part ever since that Tennessee game. If that usage can shift where he's getting more consistent work, then I think we're talking more about a low-end RB2. Adding the fact that they're playing against Tennessee this week, and then now all of a sudden I have him as not quite a mid-level, but a near mid-level RB2 heading into this week. I just kind of wanted to lay that out for everybody because there is a shift there. I don't know if everyone's paying attention to it, and there's marking off his game script because the split snap discrepancies were so wide, and Texans were losing that game by so much so early.
And that makes it independent, but that's relative. Go ahead.
60% I think is real. 80% I don't think is real.
No.
Don't unless there's an injury to Nick Chubb. Yeah. I don't disagree. Okay, so let's move on here. Because this is one hell of a question that I kind of struggle with more than I thought I was going to be honest with you. So it's a 4 receiver question. We have Courtland Sutton, Quentin Johnston, Jauan Jennings, Tez Johnson, or so a 5 receiver question, and Parker Washington this week. Adam, of these 5 receivers, where are you going?
So I ordered them: Jauan Jennings, Tez, Quentin Johnston, Parker Washington, Courtland Sutton. And to me, Jennings and Tez are firmly the top 2. And Johnston, I think a lot of people will see that with how he started the season. It's not a him problem. It is this offensive line is unbearable. They cannot survive to throw the deep ball. It's not a Quentin Johnston problem. Johnston's fine. He's getting targeted. I think he is still as good as there was always going to be some regression, realistically. Yeah. But the same player we saw in the first month is there. The tackles are dead. I don't know what else to do.
Well, you don't have anyone anymore. Yeah.
Let's not bury the lead here on your rankings. Courtland Sutton, 5th on your list. Talk about that a little bit real quick.
The last month has been dreadful. There's nothing else to say. It's bad. When we talked about it, I forget if it was last week or the week before, I was not ready to make the claim on the Troy Franklin. I think you guys were a little bit more willing to make that jump. I wasn't there yet. I think I'm there now. At this point, it's hard to ignore the trend. When it was 2 or 3 weeks of it, all right, he's the guy. I'm like, whatever. At this point, it's been a month. What are you going to do? Sutton just doesn't consistently demand the volume like he did over the first 6 weeks or so of the season. So I can't feel like I depend upon him. I think it's close to be clear. I went back and forth between him and Parker Washington because to me, it's a massive red flag. I know the numbers were good for Parker Washington last week. Massive red flag to see Jacoby get 40% of the snaps in his first week in a role that is incredibly similar and in an offense that doesn't always consistently have a ton of pass attempts, but I think those 2 are close, but they're at the bottom of the barrel.
And not to mention Brian Thomas could be back this week too. And that would I know Brian Thomas hasn't been great, but that's more targets away from Parker Washington, who got 2 touchdowns off of 4 targets a week ago. And that's the only reason he was fantasy
right.
BTW, 1 touchdown coming off of a punt return. So like not even part of the offense there for part of that. So I wanted to bring it because it's a good point, Adam. I mean, like, so I do have Courtland Sutton 4, Parker Washington 5. That's the only real change I'd have in the rankings. I'm with you with everything you said there. And here's what I wanted to lay out and piggyback off of when you made the comment about you're ready to say Troy Franklin's the number 1 guy from Courtland Sutton. He might not be the number 1 guy in Bo Nix's mind or Sean Payton's mind as far as what the pecking order actually is if you were to ask them. But in the way he's being utilized, he is the number 1 guy. Because here's what
things are shaking out. Yeah.
It's Courtland Sutton hasn't changed his role. Yeah. He's the ex-perimeter. You still look for him at the red zone situations. He still runs about 3 to 4 routes, and he doesn't get involved in much else, and he's out there to block. His role has not changed. What's changed is that Sean Payton is calling plays that actually feature getting the ball in the hands of Troy Franklin, bubble screens, slants, option route, more option routes, more wheel routes on the outside, like letting him go deep and making sure he gets the ball in short. That's why we've been seeing Troy Franklin. He's averaging 8 to 10 targets per game right here. Courtland Sutton's like never touched that on a consistent basis when it comes to volume. It's been all big play and all touchdowns. So whether they will say it or think it or not, it's clear the play calling is going to be set up as such. I'm with you. I think Courtland Sutton, I have him outside my top 36. Like I do have him as a guy you should be benching. I do have him in that wide receiver 4 tier. So I'm with you on that. I thought that was a good conversation. I want to talk about that. Before I give mine though, I want to get back to Chase. Where are you at with all this? Who are you picking?
It's hard to argue about Courtland Sutton, the Troy Franklin thing, but having him 5th in line in this group, just something doesn't sit right with me. For the record, I have Quentin Johnston first this week. I have Johnston, then Jennings. Was that?
Talk about that real quick, because I think that's a bit of a bold take.
He's got the best matchup of the 5 in terms of who he's going against here. And I keep coming back to it. Every time we want to kill Quentin Johnston and think he's going away, he is not going away. He had 10 targets last week. He was 4 of 6 for 53 and a touchdown the week before. He's just not going to go away. No matter how much we might want him to, or how much we might think that like, oh no, Ladd McConkey's coming on. Yes, Ladd is coming on, but he's not coming on in the standpoint that like Johnston is just going away. He's not going to go away. ECR wise, he and Jennings are only separated by 3 spots this week. I actually have Johnston number 1 of these 5. I have Jennings second of these guys because he's got touchdowns in 2 straight. I think he's still the top guy they have there. I don't care if Pearsall plays this week or not. Jennings has been healthy and he's been there. And who knows who's going to play quarterback for them this week. I have Sutton 3rd though. And here's the thing why. I fully have bought into the idea that yes, fantasy wise, regardless of scheme wise and how they draw it up and the game plan and everything else, fantasy wise, Franklin is the wide receiver 1 at this moment on Denver. But Courtland Sutton there has a touchdown in each of his last 4 games against Kansas City. This is a good matchup for him. This is a team that he plays well against. He averaged 17 points per game, over 17 points per game against them last season in 2 games against them. And I just think that we can't discount Courtland Sutton. He's still Courtland Sutton. He's still the better NFL wide receiver, regardless of what the fantasy stats have told us the last month or so. Courtland Sutton is still the better NFL wide receiver than Troy Franklin. Okay. So I have Sutton at 3rd. I love Tez Johnson. I wrote about him in the Overreaction Monday article this week. I think that he's great. He's been a wide receiver 2 over the last month there. He's got a touchdown in 3 of 4, but again, in terms of the talent that's there, I didn't love him as much as you did, Adam, here in the run up to the draft and in the aftermath there. And I've actually got Parker Washington can't lose as the 5th guy in line here. And I'm not alone in that. I mean, in ECR, he is the lowest ranked of all 5 of these guys. But what worries me the most here he's been very good. And I think that he's actually changed my mind as in terms of him being a viable fantasy asset, somebody that I would want to own, say in Dynasty, or somebody that I'm okay having on my roster in redraft. But I'm worried about what we saw last week, that Jakobi Meyers literally walked in the door and they were already making an honest to goodness, like it was an obvious effort to get Jakobi Meyers the ball last week. And I think that I'm curious to see what they do with Meyers going forward. As you mentioned, Dan, Brian Thomas Jr. is coming back this week, and I know he has sucked this year. I know we're all down on Brian Thomas and he sucks and we all need to get rid of him. Listen, last year still happened. That player is still there. And I'm just, of all of these offenses that we're talking about with these 5 receivers, Jacksonville is the one I have the least amount of confidence in any way, shape, or form. So that's why Washington ranks 5th for me. But Sutton, I think there's more juice there than people want to give him credit for, because we're all ready to jump onto the next guy in Troy Franklin.
Well, it's not just that the way they're utilizing Troy Franklin. It's also the combination of the fact that Botnick sucks too. And as a result, only one receiver at a time is able to eat, and they keep calling plays the way they are, then it's going to be Troy Franklin more times than not. So my order is similar to Adam. I was actually kind of surprised that Adam went with Ted Johnston second with Jauan Jennings. I thought I was going to be the only one who actually had that order, to be honest with you. And it's super close. I have Jauan Jennings sitting at wide receiver 21, Ted Johnston sitting at wide receiver 23. I have them removed by 2 spots this week.
There's not a lot of separation between any of these dudes. That's why it's a great question.
It is a good question. I don't know. I wouldn't say there's not a ton of separation, because when
I have those first 2 close and those last 3
this
close,
week. I don't think there's a ton of separation overall. I do.
I have Quentin Johnston at wide receiver 26 this week. I do have him as a mid-high end wide receiver 3. So I would say he's semi-close to Jauan. But Parker Washington and Courtland Sutton, I have as wide receiver 4s, guys I wouldn't even consider really starting in my lineup for this week, to be honest. So I do have a little more separation there, just to be clear. It's really comes down to, even if Ricky Pearsall comes back this week, he's not going to play a full plethora of snaps after missing a month and a half. Nope. And the 49ers are in a big spot. Jauan Jennings finally looks healthy. He's been the wide receiver 22 over those last 2 weeks that he's actually looked healthy. So we're going to get that with a decent match, because Arizona, I know Tez for the last 4 weeks has been the wide receiver 17, but he's still second fiddle to Emeka Egbuka. Cade Otton is still going to have these pop games where he's highly involved, and it's a match against Buffalo where that very much could be the case again here. Not saying Tez can't still get his, but they're not as reliant on him as the 49ers are on Jauan Jennings as of this moment. So again, when I'm talking about this time of the season where I'm going with a little bit less variance in certain instances, that's an instance in which I am doing that here. And that's why I have Jauan Jennings just a few spots ahead on that one.
I want to point out real quick. Last week I said, and I think we all agreed, it was going to be a lad game in that game that they had last week against Pittsburgh, and scoring wise, fantasy wise, it was. But Quentin Johnston led the team in targets with 10 targets too. So
Lad was right there. He had like 9, I believe. He was right there.
Lad had 6 targets.
I thought he had more than that.
Yeah, officially had 6 targets last week. Johnston had 10. But Ladd was the one who had the success in that game. He had 4. He caught 4 of those 6 targets for 107 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, Johnston's not going away. I know everybody hates him. I know we were all ready to give up on him before week 1 of this season, but I'm just saying.
He still had 20% of the targets. And Johnston had 27 last week. But more so with that, that's more of, look, Keenan Allen is squarely the 3rd wide receiver. Like, yes. Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston are playing well ahead of Keenan Allen now, where it was close the first month or so of the season as far as overall playing time. Allen was playing less than those two the entire time. But now we're seeing a trend in the complete opposite direction, where now, like the last 3 weeks, Keenan Allen's been at 50%, 54%, and 60% of routes run. And then you've seen him drop in his target share of 21%, 16%, 13%. And that's just led the way to, somewhat to Adam's point, with the bad offensive line, Ladd McConkey running more of those shorter over the middle routes. It's just easier to throw him the ball. So I saw Gasson before he got injured was as involved as he was. And the nice thing, here's what I would say about Quentin Johnston. Here's the nice thing. He's not just big play dependent because he actually has been running more crossers and things a little bit closer to line of scrimmage, not just nines and background fades, back shoulder fades either. So that's been kind of the uses we've been seeing, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing some of these trends go in that direction. We got to get to our next question though. So DJ Moore has struggled. The question itself was, would you actually drop him to stream a tight end this week? I think the better question is DJ Moore droppable? Adam, is DJ Moore droppable?
I don't think he's a must drop, but he's definitely droppable. Yeah, for sure. I think it really, if you're going to use him for a buy over the next 2 weeks, or next week or week 14, then sure. I would consider keeping him because I think that the type of wide receiver he is more valuable than the 7 points of your average wide receiver. Waiver tight end is going to get you if he will start for you. But on a normal week with a healthy offense, he is not going to start for you. So if you're done with buys from your starting receivers, then yeah, cut your losses. You're not going to put him in.
I mean, let's hope he's not having to start for you.
Yeah,
where are you at?
No, I agree completely. He's droppable, eminently droppable. We're talking about a guy who's the wide receiver 38 overall in half point PPR. He's the wide receiver 46 in points per game. This is a guy that, I mean, he's performing as a wide receiver 4 at best. That's his performance. I don't care where you drafted him. I know you drafted him as a wide receiver 2. That's not what he's given you. That is not what he is going to give you. Honestly, he hasn't really given you that in almost any game this season. He's only scored in double-digit fantasy points twice this year, and it's the 2 games that he scored a touchdown in.
And one of them was a rushing touchdown.
Exactly. That's the thing. How many times is DJ, especially in an offense that has in a Ben Johnson offense that boasts DeAndre Swift, that has Luther Burden, who we still have assume is going to kind of run that kind of a role. Olamide Zaccheaus has taken handoffs in that role. Moore hasn't given you anything. Don't be afraid to drop this guy. It's what I was talking about in the opening segment with there's no room for sentimentality. This is a guy that he has not seen more than 7 targets in a game this season. He has not had more than 5 catches in a game this season. And he's only done each of those 1 time this season. He's not given you anything. And oh, by the way, rest of season, Chicago has a tough wide receiver schedule. If you need to drop more to stream a tight end, to stream a flipping kicker, whatever, don't feel bad about dropping DJ Moore because he is not giving you anything. I know what he can do as an NFL player. I know we've seen him do it. I'm not going to bank on that on the off chance that he finds a nut as a blind squirrel. Drop DJ Moore if you need to.
Yeah. So there's nothing better than hate dropping a wide receiver just gave you a goose egg.
Hate drop.
I get it. And DJ Moore has not been very good this season. The last 4 weeks, and we're at the part of the season where I pay attention more to the last 4 weeks than I do the entirety of the season. In most situations. He's still a wide receiver 36. It's still a wide receiver 3. I have a hard time believing that DJ Moore is the worst player on the roster and therefore the most droppable on your team. Unless you're in shallow leagues.
I do agree with that. It's hard to believe he is the guy that you do have to drop, but if he is the guy that you have to drop, you shouldn't feel bad about it.
Agree with
but we just talked about the idea of hanging on to handcuffs that could blow up and things like that. At what point do you draw the line between what DJ Moore might, in theory, in some wonderful, pie in the sky world do?
It's not even about what upside he might potentially have.
Can give you.
It's not even about what kind of upside he might potentially have. It's kind of what Adam laid out earlier. Week 11, week 12, week 14. There's no buys in week 13. So week 11, week 12, week 14, you have buys coming up. Where does DJ Moore have to plug into your lineup? And
if he doesn't, then he is droppable.
Sure. But if he does, then that's where I'm like, there's got to be somebody else you can drop. And that's where I would put him over a handcuff who means nothing to you, unless he is the handcuff for the running back that you have. Then maybe more of a debate.
If Parker Washington is available on your waivers still, Are you hanging on to DJ Moore, or are you picking up Parker Washington?
I have DJ Moore ranked ahead of Parker Washington, so that's not really a question for me.
Yeah, okay. Tez Johnson.
I don't, but I think Parker Washington's going down.
Right. Agreed. I think
I don't think it's worth
correction. So that wouldn't be. I think more of the key would be if Courtland Sutton became available. Then yes, I'd drop DJ Moore for Courtland Sutton. That's more where I would be at this point.
If Courtland Sutton becomes available in your league, send me an invite for next season.
Don't be surprised if Courtland Sutton has another week or two with the way he's been performing last 4 weeks. I guarantee you, there's going to be a lot of leagues.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying if it happens, send me an invite for next season.
That's fine.
At STP Chase FFB. That's what I am on like every platform.
And Sleeper.
I'll play. I will play with you if people in your league want to drop Courtland Sutton's ass. Please do.
Anyway, so our last question of the week. I always try to find a defensive question, so let's get into it. Streamers, and this was a bunch of them. Like the person asking, who's the best streamer? I think he just listed his entire waiver wire. But it was the Ravens, the Packers, the Falcons, the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Cowboys. Just give me one from this group, guys, and with an explanation as to why. So Chase, let's go with you first. So which one of these defenses would you choose and why?
Falcons this week, because there is no offensive line, literally no offensive line, nobody healthy in Carolina, and I think that they can drive it to them. And I don't want anything to do with Miami or Dallas. So give me the Falcons this week.
All right, Adam.
Yeah, I'm also on the Falcons. Same reasoning and same as you laid out in the tech conversation. So nothing extra there. I'll just throw out there. Chargers is the only other one I take seriously here, if I'm being completely honest with you. So I get one of those two and then move on with your life.
I am with you guys on the Falcons. I do like the Packers quite a bit this week, playing against Jameis Winston. We know he can turn the ball over as much as anybody.
But they also could give up 400 yards passing this week and no one would bat a flipping eye.
I'd be a little surprised with Wan'Dale Robinson. He was able to pull that off. But, you know, we have seen Jameis Winston do some things with players like that before. Here's what I would say about the Falcons. To me, they win this group. It has got nothing to do with this week. Well, a little bit to do with this week, but not as much to do with this week as you would think. Their next 3 games, you have Carolina, you have the Saints, you have the Jets.
Yes.
They're the one defense out of this group that I can play them the next 3 weeks and not have to worry about it.
No, not have to worry about it. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the reason why there. And with that, we now have our Dynasty temperature check.
Hot and so hot in here.
All right. So for Dynasty temperature check today, we'll just go through 2, and we'll make it really, really easy because we're going to talk about the same team for both of them. We had a third, but just for the sake of time, because I want to talk about DFS, we'll just cut it to the same team. So we've already talked about Woody Marks today, but we're going to keep doing it. So Woody Marks is the 8th most traded running back. That is the 10th overall most traded player in Dynasty thus far, or over the last week. Some example trades for Mr. Woody Marks are a 2026 second, adding a 2026 first to your Woody Marks. So both of those assets for Jalen Waddle, or plus a 2026 first for Christian McCaffrey, or, and this one is hilarious, and I think it's a bad value. I'll just say that off rip, but Woody Marks plus a 2026 third for Rome Odunze. This shows favorite wide receiver, Romeo Doubs, straight up for Woody Marks. Or, and I've seen a lot of George Kittle in general be traded, a 2027 third and Woody Marks for George Kittle. So Dan, what do you think of these values for Mr. Woody Marks?
I would do all of them. With the exception of the first 4 CMC. Like, you got to be like CMC away to win the championship this year, because I have a strong feeling CMC might be toast after this season with the way they're utilizing him, and being that he'll be like 30. So I wouldn't want to give the first, but that's got nothing to do with Woody Marks. So that has more to do with that than anything else. All of this, like, if I can get a first for Jalen Waddle, yeah, Tyreek Hill's gone. He's bye-bye. Jalen Waddle is going to be next year's top 12 wide receiver, 1,000%. A third for like this reminds me of what was it last week or the week before when AJ Brown's name came up for somebody. I'm like, dude, like what are we talking about here? To Woody Marks and a third for take it and run. Goodbye. Kittle too. I mean, Kittle still has 2 to 3 more years left. It's hard to get good tight ends in dynasty football if you don't already have one. And I'm only giving up a third from like, next year, like 2027 for that. So look, I think Woody Marks is a fine player. Let me put it to you this way. He's a day 3 pick. He's not special. He reminds me so much of Jerome Ford. It's out of this world, where Jerome Ford came onto the scene. Like you could do a little bit of everything. And therefore he produced when he got the opportunity to do so. But there's nothing else about your game that's going to carry the fact or carry weight for you to definitively be the starter again for next season. So I if you can get decent value for Woody Marks, I'm pulling the trigger.
Jerome Ford was a better runner in college. Chase, do you have any significant disagreements to what Dan had to say there?
I'm just going to say I also love me some Jerome Ford, like as a football player. And yeah, I mean, there is that history there. No, in terms of Woody Marks, no, I'm whatever you can get for him right now. Yes, please do.
All right, cool.
And if you can combine him with something that is, if you would take CMC for a first, if you would trade a first for CMC, you'd trade Woody Marks.
throw him in. Why not?
Why not? If it's gonna like persuade that other person to pull the trigger, do it. Woody Marks is nothing special. He's a 4th round pick. He's on an offense that doesn't necessarily have anybody for the future. I'm not worried about Woody Marks. No, yeah, trade him for whatever you can get him for.
All right. This is the one coming up next that I most wanted to get to. So we'll get to this and we'll get it over to DFS. But Nico Collins having a ton of trade volume, or at least for a wide receiver or a player overall, an asset of this tier, is super, super interesting to me. And I really want to hear what you guys have to say about it. So Nico Collins, 2nd most traded wide receiver, 11th most traded player overall. A lot of movement there. It's been a disappointing season for him, but he hasn't been unplayable either. I don't think, and I think a lot of it's explainable outside of him. So for me, I don't necessarily know that I'm completely removing what I thought about him going into the season for dynasty purposes. But again, curious what you guys have to think on that front. Some example trades for him: a 2026 first rounder, just straight up, a 2027 first rounder, straight up. This one showing you that some people do still value him pretty heavily. 2 2026 firsts. You have Nico Collins plus Devonta Smith for Puka. And then we have Nico Collins for Breece Hall and a 2027 second. Or Nico Collins for Ollie Gordon and a 2027 first. So Chase, we'll kick it off with you on this one. What do you think about these Nico Collins prices?
Yeah, if someone wants to give you 2 firsts next season for Nico Collins, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to go with that. Otherwise, man, trade him for a single first 2 years out. Come on, combining him with Devonta Smith to get Puka Nacua. Come on. These are way undervaluing what Nico Collins can and has, and I think will give you going forward. So I'm not in on any of that. He's only 26 years old, dude. This is a guy that you're going to have on your roster for a long time to come. This is a guy that we know, and I was not a Nico Collins guy early in his career, but he's proven that he is that kind of a guy. This is the top 12 type receiver. And I don't think you can just give him away for anything. I don't care if you're not contending, then what are you doing trying to trade away for firsts for? You want to keep a guy like this. If you are contending, he's a top 12 wide receiver. What are you trying to give this guy away for? I don't get it in Dynasty. I don't see any of these being a realistic trade that I would consider outside of the possibility of the 26 firsts. And that still depends on maybe where they fall in the lineup. No, I'm hanging on a Nico no matter what here.
Yeah,
It could be anything. It could even be Nico Collins.
Right.
Dan, do you have any disagreements there?
No, I mean, said perfectly there, Adam. So I'm not gonna talk about like the actual trade here that's going on, because I'm gonna talk more kind of what Chase was laying out there. He's at the super sweet age where he still has 2 to 3 years of prime left. Maybe you're off of CJ Stroud, and I'm not personally. I have a lot more problems with Nick Caley than I do anything else, and I think it's very real. They'll change offensive coordinators again. We might be in territory where DeMeco Ryans is Mike Tomlin, though, just can't pick an offensive coordinator. That's a problem in and of itself. I get it. But CJ Stroud still is a quarterback I believe in. They clearly believe in offense because they wouldn't have drafted 2 more wide receivers. And Nico Collins is not the type of guy where I get worried about, does he have all the target consolidation in the world? Because he's a hell of a route runner. And he can play all the different positions, and they move him inside and outside. They feature him as that number 1. So whether they have another good complementary receiver, that just means more one-on-one coverage for Nico Collins. Remember Brandon Ayuk merged onto the scene as an elite fantasy football wide receiver 2 years ago. Nico Collins had just as good of a season from an efficient standpoint. It shows you like what kind of talent level, what kind of separation, what kind of efficiency he can have on a week-to-week basis. Well, he doesn't need the 150 to 180 targets that the other wide receiver ones need. And so when you combine that with the idea that he's not going anywhere, he's still going to be the number 1 target of his young quarterback, CJ Stroud, who's, regardless of what you think about him, he's still not going anywhere for at least a couple of seasons. I don't, and he's in 26, the sweet spot that you want to be for Dynasty. Unless you're blowing my socks off, I don't know why you're thinking about trading Nico Collins. I'm not surprised that he's getting traded a bunch. This happens when players are having bad seasons and they suddenly pop, whether it's Dynasty or redraft. But with Nico Collins, it just logically, if you think about it for a second, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. That's right.
I think that's a good place to leave it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe it'll help us make sense if we get some drinks on us.
Yeah, heck yeah. Let's get some drinks going here. Listen, it's a weird week. If you take a look at the lines that are going on this week, there's not a lot of big favorites. There's a lot of actually close games in terms of the lines that we're looking at this week. But when I take a look at what's going on this week, it's going to feel a little bit familiar in terms of some of the players that we're going with, but I mean, at a certain point, you can't overthink it here. So I'm looking at that Monday night game between Dallas, the Cowboys, at the Raiders in Vegas. That's got the highest over-under right now of the week at 50 points, according to the fine folks over at Sharp Football Analysis there. Dallas is a slight favorite, about a field goal and a half favorite there. But that's the game that's got a lot of juice in terms of points scored. And when we look at how these two teams have played against the pass, I'm ready to fire it up again with Dak Prescott. I know it's the 3rd time we've used him this season, but Dak Prescott is only 6,500 this week. He is the quarterback 6 in salary this week. He's the quarterback 5 in terms of ECR ranking. Okay. Now on the season, he's the quarterback 10 in terms of both overall points and points per game. But we're talking about a Raiders team that, they've been middle of the road against opposing quarterbacks. They've been 19th against quarterbacks. They've given up the 19th most points, I should say, against quarterbacks. But they did give up a big game the other day to Patrick Mahomes, who threw for 286 yards and 3 touchdowns against them. He was quarterback 7 in DraftKings scoring that week that he played against them. They also allowed our boy, Mr. Lawrence over in Jacksonville to rush for 2 touchdowns. I mean, they're not a juggernaut against opposing fantasy quarterbacks. If you look at the quarterbacks that the Raiders have played, it's not a shock why they haven't given up a ton of points to that position. But when they have given up points, it's the guys that have the skill set that I think Dak can take advantage of there. I really like Dak this week. So we'll roll with him at 6,500 there at quarterback. And we are going to play then his top wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. I know, again, we've run with him before. He's at 8,000 this week. He's the wide receiver 5 in salary. He's the wide receiver 4 in ECR here. And if you take a look at what he's done on the season, he's a wide receiver 10 in points per game, but you have to take out the 3 or 4. Actually, you have to take about 4 games because he missed 3, but he really missed all of that game against the Bears too with that sprain that he had there. So he's only averaging around 16 and a half points per game this season in a DraftKings standpoint, but he's actually up around 20 if you take that Bear game out. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to take that out because he came out in the first quarter. He was done for the game. So Las Vegas gives up the 6th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb has been averaging almost 11 targets a game in the games that he's been healthy in. I really like what CeeDee Lamb offers against this Las Vegas Raiders pass defense that I use in loose quotes there. If you want to save some money this week, if you want to play George Pickens, that's fine with me. I would caution you to the idea that George Pickens hasn't scored a touchdown since Lamb came back 3-4 weeks ago, but he still has averaged over 13 and a half points per game in terms of a DraftKings standpoint. He's still putting up wide receiver 2 numbers. So if you want to save some money, you want to go with Pickens, that's fine. But for my money, I'm rolling with Dak and with CeeDee Lamb this week. So then what I'm going to do also against them is I'm going to roll back and play a Raiders wide receiver this week. The one I'm going with is Trey Tucker for 5,100 this week. He's the wide receiver 33, both in salary and in the ECR in terms of where he's ranked for this week. On the season, he's wide receiver 30 overall. He's 35th in points per game. But this is a team that, remember, just gave up Jacoby Myers. They got rid of him. And I like the cheap play with Tucker with no Myers, involved. If you want to play Tyler Lockett, he saw some run last week. I think he's going to see some run going forward. I think that Tyler Lockett is going to have a role in this offense, especially in any scoring format that gives you any kind of points per reception. And he's even cheaper this week at 3,400. But I like Tucker's multifaceted role in this offense. I like the fact that they manufacture touches for him. I like the fact that they will give him runs. I like the fact that they scheme him open. They try to give him the ball back. Dallas is giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers this season. And if you take a look, they gave up really good points to Marvin Harrison Jr., to Troy Franklin, to Savion Williams against the Packers. Now, Savion Williams didn't score a ton of points, but he had his best receiving day of the season against the Dallas Cowboys. And Savion Williams has one of those roles as well with the Packers where they try to manufacture him touches. And I like that idea against Trey Tucker. So I will roll Trey Tucker for 5,100. He's a cheap ad. It's a cheap playback there. And I think that there are points to be had here against this Dallas defense. So then the last guy that we're rolling with before we get to the actual cocktail here is we're going to take Jaylen Warren at 6,100 this week for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their game against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's running back 15 in salary this week, but he's a top 12 play in terms of ECR. He's been running back 20 on the season, no matter which way you're slicing it here. But if you look back a couple of weeks ago, he had his best rushing game of the season in week 7 here against the Cincinnati Bengals. He was running back 6 that week in DraftKings scoring. Cincinnati gives up the most points to opposing running backs. And I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to mention it again. I think that this looks like another game for the Steelers where it's a Warren and tight end game for Pittsburgh. I also am playing Pat Freiermuth in a ton of my daily lineups here this week because I think that there is juice to be had here in the tight end game. It's an Arthur Smith offense, FAS, but at the same time, it's an Arthur Smith offense, and he loves tight ends. I'm playing Pat Freiermuth in a couple places as well, but I think that it's a running back tight end game here for the Pittsburgh Steelers against Cincinnati, and I'm willing to roll with their running back, Jaylen Warren, at 6,100 here. And there's also a lot of fun options to fill around these guys if you want to save some money, but we'll talk about that in a minute here. Let's talk about the cocktail real quick before I get to what Dan and what Adam think here. This week's cocktail, we're going to call the stretch run because, as we mentioned earlier, we are entering into that time of season where you need to start thinking about the playoffs. You need to start thinking about the end game. You need to start thinking about the end of the season and how you're going to set yourself up for it here. So the stretch run is a take on a grapefruit based cocktail. Okay. If you're not a big grapefruit guy like me, I'm not going to claim that this is like a healthy option, but hey, it has been shown that eating a half a grapefruit for breakfast every day is correlated with weight loss. I'm not saying this is a healthy cocktail. I'm saying, hey, you could do worse than including some grapefruit in your diet here. So for the stretch run, we're going to take our shaker full of ice here. We're going to add in 1.5 ounces of regular Jack Daniel's whiskey. I haven't done a lot of Jack Daniel's on this show, but we're going to do some Jack Daniel's today. 1.5 ounces of Jack Daniel's whiskey. We're also going to add in 0.5 ounce of Jack Daniel's honey into that. Okay. On top of that, we are going to add 2 ounces of grapefruit juice. Now, fresh squeezed is the best, straight out of a grapefruit. If you don't like that, if you want to try and buy yourself some grapefruit juice, this drink will run a little sweeter if you include some ruby red grapefruit juice in it rather than just going with straight grapefruit juice. But for my tastes and what I like to have in my cocktails, I'm going with straight grapefruit juice. So I've got 1.5 ounces of Jack Daniel's, 0.5 ounce of Jack Daniel's honey, and 2 ounces of grapefruit juice in my shaker full of ice. I'm going to shake this up. And while I shake this up, Dan, Adam, I'm curious to hear your takes either on the guys that I've mentioned or anybody that you have in mind for your lineups this week.
Well, here's what I'll say first for the guys that you mentioned. Jalen Warren is the biggest value that just stares you down in the face this week, at least for me anyway, because I have him as a top 7 running back against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's only $6,100. So I think you hit the nail on the head as far as that's too good of a value to pass up on in your lineups, even if he does wind up being a pretty common play. But let's not forget about Joe Flacco, who's also my top 8 of quarterbacks. That Bengals-Pittsburgh game, it just screams value everywhere because of just how that game can go. Thank you, Cincinnati defense, for being so bad. Chase Brown, Samaje Perine is still not practicing, coming off the bye week. I doubt he plays. If that happens, Chase Brown has been on a 90% snap count, basically, since that's been the case. And he's been also involved in the passing game himself, getting his RB1 value back against Pittsburgh, who's not been a great defense against running backs anyway. So he's $5,700. And then the other guy who I'm valuing actually quite a bit is Christian Watson. So there's some questions here. Romeo Doubs, how healthy is he this week? They're playing against the Giants. That big play could definitely be there. And he's only $4,400. So some of the value plays that I'm looking at. Adam, what do you got?
The other guy I'll throw out there, I know it's not been the best month, but man, it's really, really interesting to want to play Quinshon Judkins against that Ravens rushing defense. Not the cheapest guy in the world. I know he hasn't been the most efficient either, but I think this is a really good spot for him to get back in one where I don't think, as much as I do think the Ravens win the game, I don't think the game script is going to be as prohibitive as it might initially feel like it should be.
Like it was a week 2?
Yeah.
No, excellent. Yeah. No, Dan, I love you bringing up Christian Watson. I actually had him in my notes right here. Like when I said that there's lots of fun, cheaper options to fill in around these guys. Tez Johnson, who we talked about earlier, Woody Marks, who we talked about earlier, Troy Franklin, who we've talked about, but Christian Watson was one of the guys I had on this. I love him against the New York Giants there. I think that's a great add into this. So I shook up our Jack Daniel's honey. I shook up the grapefruit juice in our shaker. I strained it into a coupe glass here. I have garnished that with a slice of red grapefruit there, but I'm going to top this whole thing off with some Paulaner grapefruit Radler. It's a grapefruit Radler. It's a beer here from Paulaner, the folks over there. I'm going to top off that in my coupe glass with some of that. And that is going to be our stretch run there. Like I said, garnish it with a grapefruit slice. If you want to do a grapefruit twist, you can do that too. Either way, you want that scent in there of the grapefruit to work with this drink. But that's our drink this week, our stretch run. That's our guys that we're rolling with this weekend. I love the suggestions you guys made as well to fill in around these guys. Slanjava, everybody, good luck. Let's go win some money.
It's funny that Chase's birthday is today. He's officially an old man, and the first thing he's doing is breaking out the grapefruit. It all ties in. It all ties in together. That's going to do it for Operation Domination today. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Remember, we'll be available to you on your favorite podcast app and our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. I'll be back tomorrow with Dr. Brian Scott. Not that there's not always, but there's a lot of big injury updates that we've been waiting for on a lot of players that we're going to get into tomorrow with that. And make sure you come back on Friday or Saturday, with Chaz Flardy of Sports Betting Weekly, because we have been hitting some bets as of late, and we keep lining your pockets green. So all that and more this week. You guys have a good one. We'll see you again soon.